we don't have a mayor right now in Eric Adams that stands up to Trump, right? So what does that look like for us in the city council? It means doing court watch at 26 Federal Plaza. It means standing with immigrant advocates and lawyers to secure funding that we shouldn't even have to be fighting for. Funding for legal services so that families, when they go into immigration court, have a lawyer. When they go into family court, they have a lawyer. So that when they go into housing court, they have a lawyer. It looks like ensuring that we have simple things like language access coming out of city agencies. You know, when you have a family that needs food stamps to put food on the table and they can't pick up the phone and talk to a human being on the other line, that's a failure of government. And that's also a moral failure. So we need a city that's robust because we're at the front lines.
Welcome to Uptown Voices. From Harlem to the Heights to the northern tip of Inwood, we're here to celebrate our people and together seek solutions for the difficult issues we're all confronting as neighbors. Regardless of what hood you represent, we share the same goal, creating the best community we can, somewhere to enjoy, where we can build our lives and raise our children. We want to thank 181 Cabrini, located on the corner of 181st Street and Cabrini Boulevard, for its generous support for this podcast. It's your neighborhood bistro just steps away from the North Walk of the GWB. Stay tuned for a discount code that you can mention to your bartender or server the next time you visit the restaurant. We also need financial contributions from listeners like you to produce, improve, and expand our content. To contribute, please scan the QR code on the screen or visit www.livingamericana.com. That's living without a G.
What up, everybody? It's Led Black, and this is the Uptown Voices podcast, Led Black and Octavio Blanco. And we have none other than our council member, Carmen De La Rosa. She really is like one of the people here, one of the now, I don't want to say one of the few politicians that's insulted, but one of the real people that I think that comes from the community, stands up for the community, worked her way, into community, and it's such an honor and a pleasure to have you here, Carmen. What's going on? How you doing, sis?
It's my pleasure to be here. Enjoying these months of summer, but I'm excited to be in community and share the space with both of you. You have my respect.
Likewise.
And I'm looking forward to this conversation.
And for those that don't know you, right, like, tell us a little bit about your history. How did you come up in this, right? I was reading about how you wanted to be a lawyer and then you got into community and just never left that. Why is community important to you, and what does community mean to you?
Absolutely. Well, I grew up on Dykeman Street, right, on Post Avenue. I come from Inwood, and I immigrated here like many families do from the Dominican Republic. I grew up in the heart of that community, and coming up, the child of immigrants, although I was an immigrant myself, I had the privilege of being able to learn the language. One of the main things that I started doing when I was very young, like many of us, is reading letters for my neighbors, for my parents, translating. I would go with my grandmother to the doctor's appointments. And my father really made it a point to tell me every time I would do those things, that's community. That's what we have. We have community. My dad was a bodeguero. So everybody that came into the grocery store was family, and all his brothers were taxi drivers. My mom was a home attendant. And so if you think about it, all of my work is service to community and service to others. So that's really what put the bug in me. If you ask me about how to stand up for your community, I remember one of the earliest things I did was help my neighbors fill out a census form. I was the tutor on the block. I would tutor my neighbors, my younger neighbors that were, in school and struggling. We would do tutoring. And then I went to college, and I went to Fordham University in the Bronx. And I wanted to be a lawyer so bad. And I started to learn about sociology and politics. And I decided the summer before I went to law school to take a break and get a job, because who can live in the hood without a job, right? My mom instilled in me from an early age, we got to earn $1. We got to bring money home. And that's exactly what we did. And I walked into an assembly member's office on the Upper West Side in 2007. And I never left politics. I never made it to law school, but I like to think myself as someone who has helped my community by creating the laws of this state and of this city. And in 2007, I began my work in government. Doing constituent services on the Upper West Side. I started running campaigns at about 2010. And then I ended up meeting the former council member, Danis Rodriguez. I worked for him for 5 years, became his chief of staff. ran his re-election campaign, ran the congressional campaign for Adriano Espaillat, and after a while, I started asking myself, you're helping all these men become elected officials, and we have no women voices that are reflective not only of women, but of my generation, right? But with all respect to the trailblazers that blazed the trail so that I could stand here, the voice of my experience wasn't in those voices. And so I decided to run for the state assembly in 2017 and for the city council in 2021, becoming the first Dominican woman to occupy the seat. And it's a blessing to be able to serve the community where I was raised, where I'm raising my daughter, and just work towards, envisioning that New York City that I think we all deserve.
And why did you go from the assembly to the council? Why was that important to you?
Yeah, for a few reasons. Look, the council seat is a historic seat. In the 90s, the District 10 council seat was created specifically to represent the Dominican community. It was occupied by Guillermo Linares, as everybody knows, in the 90s, right? That proliferation of political power, of the Dominican Day Parade, brought the need to have a seat created in the city. It was created alongside with the Chinatown seat for the Asian community and the first LGBTQ seat downtown. And so that was a year where they were kind of redistricting the maps. And so this seat was created, and I served 5 years in the assembly. We were able to pass the DREAM Act, get the Fund for Excluded Workers Act, which was the first time in the history of the state where we got undocumented families, basically unemployment assistance during the pandemic. I felt like my work wasn't done in those 5 years. Although I did a lot, I had more to give. But, like many of us, we're human beings, right? And I think that for folks who come from working class communities, who understand what it is to be the person that makes it, quote unquote, for your family, you become everything. In 2019, my husband was diagnosed with a brain tumor. And I recall being in Albany, and my husband had an episode. My mother, almost 70 years old, 5'0", literally 120 pounds, she couldn't be his caretaker, care for my daughter. When I ran for office, my daughter was 2 years old. And now this responsibility of a sick partner at that time. And I had to make a choice. And the choice was to be there for my family the way I've always been. Community means being there and it means showing up, but I have more to give. So I made the decision to run for the council seat. And, at the time, some people called it selfish, and they said, but you already have a seat. Why you want another seat? And, I said to people, I said, listen, I've done the work in Albany. I can certainly do the work in New York City. But most of all, when a man says I'm moving from one position to another, that's never questioned. But when a woman is sitting here telling you, I take care of everyone around me, and in this moment they need me, that shouldn't be questioned either.
Exactly.
I'm telling you how I can serve. And, at that time, there was also the movement for 21 and 21, which was getting 21 women elected to the city council. So for those personal reasons, mixed with the fact that I felt like it was important to continue to have representation for my community, not only as a Dominican, but as a Dominican woman we've never had a Dominican woman occupy this seat. I felt like it was the right time for me to come back down to the city and continue to give to this community a lot more energy that I still have to serve.
And what's interesting about the whole Dominican women, they really are the backbone, of our community, right? But they have been voices. So I like that you continue to uphold that legacy. But it's interesting with the council, right? The council now is in the crosshairs federally. You know what I mean? And I'm glad that we have a fighter like you there, because there's a fight coming. So can you tell us about that fight?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, let me tell you this. When I got elected to the assembly, 2017, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump were running. And everybody dubbed it the year of the woman. And we got some women in office. I was one of those women. But the minute Donald Trump stepped foot in the White House, I stepped foot into the streets. We started to have actions against him in Trump Tower. We stood up when ICE came for our families. We've continued to stand with people in our community that are at that crosshairs of not only the criminal justice system, but the deportation machine that is exacerbated under the Trump administration. He's come for our food stamps. He's come for Medicaid. He's coming for immigrant families. And he's come for DEI. He's come for all the things that I feel reflect not only my community, but also the American values as we know them in modern history, right? And so it's important for us at this moment to have a city council and a mayor and a mayor. I'm going to emphasize that that is willing to stand up for Trump. And unfortunately, the council has had to play double defense because we don't have a mayor right now in Eric Adams that stands up to Trump, right? So what does that look like for us in the city council? It means doing court watch at 26 Federal Plaza. It means standing with immigrant advocates and lawyers to secure funding that we shouldn't even have to be fighting for. Funding for legal services so that families, when they go into immigration court, have a lawyer. When they go into family court, they have a lawyer. So that when they go into housing court, they have a lawyer. It looks like ensuring that we have simple things like language access coming out of city agencies. You know, when you have a family that needs food stamps to put food on the table and they can't pick up the phone and talk to a human being on the other line, that's a failure of government. And that's also a moral failure. So we need a city that's robust because we're at the front lines. You know, just a week ago, I heard Tom Honan say that they're going to flood New York City with ice.
Yep.
And we're already seeing that. We're seeing that in Upper Manhattan. We're seeing it in the Bronx. We're seeing it in parts of Brooklyn. And so we have to be ready and we have to be the front line. That means being on the ground with the community, which is something that is my passion, to really be helping people to unlock resources. Because if you're hungry, you can't think straight in order to make sure that you have the right legal representation. If you're worried about your child having an appropriate seat at a school, you can't think about what's your next step as a family. Those things are going to be important and they're going to play a role. Unfortunately, like I said, we haven't had that under Eric Adams. And I'm looking forward to having another mayor occupy the other side of City Hall, where the mentality is not scarcity, but is how do we make families thrive? I think we're going to get that if we're lucky enough to get Zoran Mandani to be the next mayor of New York City in November.
Yeah, I think we're all looking forward to him as mayor. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I think we're on Team Mamdani for sure. We appreciate the work, and you know, today I rode a city bike past your office, and I noticed that line that's always in front of your office.
Yes.
You know, and that line is not just today. That line is every
single day.
Every day there's a line outside of your office of people who are asking for your assistance. Yes. There's also people online who are advocating for change. And I want to give you this opportunity because this show is more seeking solutions rather than just complaining about. We have complaints, there's issues. We don't shy away from the issues, but we look at it through what is the solution. So one of the solutions is getting people, community, our neighbors involved and get them to realize just how much power they each have in this fight. We can feel like we are powerless, but that's not the case. So can you tell us a little bit about what your needs are, like help me help you kind of a situation? You know what I mean? Like what can the community do to assist you so that we can actually advocate for ourselves and that you can have as much gravitas and power because it's evident that the community is behind you. So what can we do as neighbors?
Yeah. So first of all, let me just say that I got to shout out my team at the district office. Those mostly women. We got 2 men, 3 now, but they don't go home. They stay there. And you know, those lines out the door break my heart because I wish that we had an office space and a 24/7 capacity to service every single person that comes in. You wouldn't even imagine. There's people that are on those lines that are waiting just to fill out a housing application for an apartment, to someone who's facing housing court eviction, to someone who has an issue in their family. You know, I met a young woman who was suicidal a few years ago, and she walked into the office and she just wanted help. She wanted somebody to listen to her. Every single issue in every walk of life exists in our community. The needs are so vast. There's a few things that I think we can do to work together. The first thing is that we need to understand that 90% of the people that are walking into my office are walking in because of a housing related issue. Either they're facing displacement, they're afraid that they don't know where the next money for rent is coming in the next month, or they need a different type of apartment. You know, we have an aging community. Most of our apartments uptown are walk-ups. And if you're 70 years old with a walker, a wheelchair, or any type of physical disability, you're stuck in a walk-up. So they're coming in hopes that they can get an apartment with more accessibility, or they're just saying, I can't afford another rent increase. You know, I was very big around the rent freeze. I've been big around the rent freeze. I think the whole 8 years that I've been in office now, from the assembly to the council, because the affordability of our community is an issue that we all got to tackle. If people can't stay here, community literally disappears. And so I need people to start to get involved. For example, we had a big rally around the rent freeze and we had a good showing. I think about 60 people came out. That's a good showing, but we could have 160. Why? Because District 10 actually has the most rent stabilized apartments in the state of New York. And so it's when there are things that speak to you, come out. And where there's things that don't speak to you, but they might speak to one of your neighbors and your neighbors can't make it, come out. You know, one of the things that we started as a council is a co-governance model. And we've created committees where members of the community can get involved. They can bring issues to us. They can help us problem solve the issues. There's this fallacy that when we become elected officials, they give us a magic wand in the toolkit where I can just be like, okay, no more potholes. I wish that was the case. But every single one of those cases takes time, takes effort, takes follow-up, takes persistence. So, for example, if you see a pothole in the street that hasn't been addressed for 3 months, don't assume that as a council office, we know about it. Snap a picture, upload it to 311, contact our office, tell us, here's the picture, and we will follow up. Making sure as well that people understand what, like, the jurisdictions of government is important too. And I've been talking to my team about us doing a little bit more one-on-ones around how government works. Oftentimes people will walk into the office over a federal issue that the council member doesn't have the reach, right, in the law to solve. And so that means that we need to have a robust referral system to refer them either to their federal representatives or to a lawyer most of the time. And so every single year we engage in the budget process. And we call it the budget dance in City Hall. And I've seen so many of our constituents, and shout out to them, who come out, whether it's fighting for 1% for parks, because we have so much parkland uptown, and we need more funding, or whether, like I said earlier, we're fighting for legal services lawyers, or we're fighting for funding for after school, or we're fighting for funding for food pantries. There's ways to get involved. And that is my biggest plea, right? I think in this last election, we saw what I'm calling a surge and an excitement towards Zoran that really brought out a sector of the population that I've been dreaming gets empowered. It's a sector of the population that politicians consider a non-reliable sector. I think that is the sector that has the most power if we just use that power in a way and channel that power in a way towards direct change in our community, right? Because
what's that sector? What is it that you can you help us define it? Because I think I saw that too, but I want to hear from you, like what you think that sector is.
I think that sector is a younger electorate, an electorate that is between the ages of 18 and I dare say 45, right? To just capture the whole gamut, is a sector of when your mom goes to vote, you stay home, you're coming to vote with your mom, you're making a plan for your parents and teaching your parents how to vote, right? That is the sector that I'm talking about. Let me tell you something. On election day, you know how I knew Zoran was going to win Uptown? I had a woman come up to me, and this is going to be a little bit funny, but it talks to how our community sees things. And she goes, and somebody was standing on the same corner as I, and they were like, go vote for Cuomo. And she was like, and she went and voted. She came back out. She goes, voté por el hindú. I voted for Zoran, right?
Yeah.
And she whispered it in my ear because she felt like she was being judged by the other women her age who were voting for Cuomo. And I said, thank you, mommy, thank you. And she said, you know why? In Spanish, she said, ¿sabe por qué? And I said, why? She said, because my daughter told me about him, right? And so think about the power in that, right? Our parents, look, full circle moment, right? we are the reliable source for our parents who come to this country, don't have access to all the information we have, maybe don't have access to technology, don't know the language well, but we know how to download all that information because of the privilege of education that we've had. Now it's time for us to sit with our parents and say, look, this is why it matters. This is how it impacts our community. And they will listen because they have that trust. And so I'm excited for what's to come, for sure.
It is super exciting, and I also want to really do commend you because you are super responsive. You know, it's been plenty of times where I'm out and about because I'm always uptown, and I see something and I'll tag your office, and you guys plenty of times, like the next day it's cleaned up. You know what I mean? It might get messed up again, right? The tunnel is it could be problematic, but it seems like every single time if I tag you on a post, you guys address it as best as you can. How are you guys making that happen? Are you guys on social media 24/7? Like, how do you do that?
Well, again, I got to shout out my girl, Frey, who's my communications director. So when you see a very spicy comment back, that's me personally. But when you see a very professional one, that's like, hey,
that's funny.
We're taking care of it. We've addressed it to the appropriate agency. That's usually Frey. The way that it works is that Frey is my communications director. She monitors all the social media when we get tagged, but then she taps in people in our office that are in charge of different things. We have the community affairs person, and mind you, this is not 100 people. I have 9 staff members, but we have the community affairs person who deals directly with the agencies. We have my chief of staff who's kind of overseeing and playing defense on any emergencies that are happening or special projects. Then you have my constituent services team. So if you hit us up and you're like, hey, my parents are, in need of a housing lawyer, or I have this repair that's needed in the community, the constituent affairs team, which is 4 people, will call you back and make an appointment or tell you to come into the office and see you. So we're really locked in. I always say to folks, I'm Carmen, right? The girl who grew up on Post. I'm Carmen from Dykeman, and I'm Mia's mom, and I'm Carmen's daughter and Ramon's daughter. And when I finish being the council member, I want to walk around my community and I want people to be like, I remember the time that, I called your office because there was something going on in the community. Thank you. That's how I want the legacy of responsiveness and a legacy of our community mattered to be remembered. And so that is something that I feel like as a team, we all hold. We're a close-knit group. We try to make it happen. Everything could be responded to in 5 minutes, right? There's no magic wand, but we make magic with the resources that we have because it comes from in here, comes from the heart.
I love that.
You've been working since pre-pandemic and now we're post-pandemic. I think that we can't have any conversations without taking into account the impact that the pandemic has had on, since we're local, we'll talk about our community. Have you noticed that it's been more difficult to engage folks post-pandemic, or do you think that people are starting to shake some of those cobwebs off and coming out more? I really think it's important because I do believe in the power of the community, and we saw with Zoran's primary win just how much power the community does have. And in the conversations that we've had on this podcast with folks who are involved in housing, that issue of individual power and of community power and just like on the most basic level of talking to your neighbors is so important. And I think that the pandemic really did have an impact in terms of like making it hard, maybe making it, we were all in one place and maybe the messaging that we were getting was making us afraid more of each other, and I'd like to break through that. Do you think that we're sort of in this place where we're starting to see our communities starting to sort of like shake off those
I was starting to see our community kind of bounce back from the fears of not being social and being together, and there's been some good moments and there's been some good social gatherings. I will say that remote also makes people want to engage in different ways. It's an opportunity, but it's also a challenge if you're trying to get bodies in a room.
Mm-hmm.
I will say though that unfortunately the last month or so, I have seen a cooling off effect again because of the ICE fears in our community. That is just a fact. I have held a few community events and people are afraid of coming out. They're not sure. They don't want to be in the mix just in case. And that's heartbreaking for me, like people not wanting to come to our office for help or not wanting to come to socialize at a community event because they don't know what's in store. And so I hope that, we can come together and kind of make sure that people who need our support know that they're supported. But it is a fearful time because we just don't know what this madman in the White House is going to do.
Yeah.
When you hear his top officials saying we're going to flood New York City, there is a cooling effect, a chilling effect for people who are in mixed status homes and even people that have status that are just worried about what it means for them.
Yeah, that's why I think it's so important for allies to stand up and really be allies. And when folks, because it's understandable if you're afraid because you're being threatened. I mean, it's not like you're afraid for no reason. You're afraid
Exactly.
because you're actually being threatened. So allies need to stand up. Allies really need to be there in this time because more than ever, it's not a time to be quiet. Go ahead, Led. I think you
Yeah,
were going to say
yeah.
something.
To that point, right? Speaking of a madman and ice and heartbreak, how heartbreaking was, because I know it's for me and it still is every day. How much of our community is swinging rightward? Like
Yeah.
how much does that hurt? Because every day I'm arguing with people on social media. And it's like they're actually cheerleading some of this stuff on, right? And I understand, like, when white people, if someone tells you it's brown people taking it, might kind of make sense, right? Your own believe in that. Like, tell
Even
me
though it's
your
lies.
experience with that, and how
Even
do
though
you
it's
counter
lies.
it? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking. I was one of those people that was out there campaigning for Kamala. And early on, I had to face people saying to me, like, oh, well, you believe in abortion at 9 months and really questioning my faith. I'm someone of faith. I grew up in the church, but I also believe unequivocally in my right to choose and have bodily autonomy, right? And that's not something I'm ever going to flinch at. But those conversations are hard. In our community, we haven't had the opportunity to have those in-depth conversations. They're starting to happen. I've been following the work and working with this group of women that is finally starting to have those intergenerational conversations. For Dominicans, back in the Dominican Republic, there's no separation between church and state, right? And so the role that sort of religious extremism, for lack of a better word, could play in that is real. But I also think that it was a sense, and again, I don't want to cast blame on anybody because I feel like in New York City, there's this like perfect storm of conditions that make it so that it is the poorest among us, those that need government the most, that are like, I'm voting for Donald Trump. But the
Mm-hmm.
reason is because they feel like they're not being heard and they
Mm-hmm.
see a caricature in the TV that is speaking to them in a very direct way.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't feel that they're being listened to by the party that's supposed to define their values. But at the end of the day, there is another side to that coin. And that is the side that, like I tell people, just because you own a bodega or a restaurant or you're a small business owner, don't think that if Trump sees you, he ain't going to throw his keys at you and be like, go park my car.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because at the end of the day, he doesn't see past who you are and where you come from.
Right.
Right. And so this mentality that, oh, we're here and we're going to close that door behind us is a false promise. They will come for you. History has shown us they come for them and then they will come for us. And when we fail to see history for what it is, then we're bound to repeat it. And we all know that. And that is the case. The first Trump administration was horrific for many families. We're still reeling from the impacts of that. And the second Trump administration will be even more horrific. The sad fact of the matter is that they had a playbook. There was a blueprint, the Project 2025, and they told everyone what they were going to do. And
Mm-hmm.
people did not believe it. And so, I am seeing some buyer's remorse, if you will. There are people that come into the office, and although we don't play politics in the office, right? We serve everybody, no matter who you vote for. It's a sala, so there's always conversation. And people, they'll tell you, no, yo no creía que él iba a deportar a los residentes. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm hoping that there is an awakening that happens as well. But it's also awakening for the Democratic Party, of which I belong to. It's a party that I have run on and been a part of all my life.
Amen.
For us to start to speak to the values of people, not only with words, but with action. People want action. Politicians speaking is beautiful, but people want to see action. And when you can't get your food stamp application done because HRA has a vacancy rate that does not allow for capacity to service every hungry New Yorker, you create a rage in people where they feel that their needs are not being met. And so we must change something. And that is a growing concern for me.
Yeah, and I agree with the action part, and I think that's one of the reasons that Mamdani won. He ran on affordability, but he kept coming at Cuomo's neck, like so he Kendrickin. Like every time he just is going so hard, and I think people want fighters. That we don't want. I mean, I'm sorry to say, there's a lot of letter writing and other things, but that's not doing anything. And I think it is a wake up call for the Democratic Party.
And we
Boots on the ground.
And we need to get jobs that haven't been filled in city agencies that desperately need people to work, whether it's the 911 operators,
Yes.
or whether it's the Department of Housing Preservation, or whatever the case may be. I mean, speak to that. Like the fact that this mayor that we have now has just been not. I mean, he's been ruling by not ruling.
Yeah, well, I'm the labor chair in the city council, and I've had like 7 hearings on the vacancy rates in New York City. You know, the mayor and his OMB director, his budget director, have this 2-for-1 hiring policy in the city. And it means that 2 people have to leave for 1 person to be hired in most city agencies. The only titles that does not apply for are titles for like the police, firefighters, emergency personnel. That is a disservice to our city. Why? Because the city agencies, like literally think about needing a Department of Buildings inspector to come out and inspect the building because there was a fire. You need to have those positions staffed up. Again, social services, to have applications processed on time. You need to fill those vacancies. And we've been talking to them about that. They're refusing to budge. At this point, it's like talking to a brick wall. And so, like I said, I'm looking forward to a new administration that is actually willing to listen. But there are so many jobs online when you go to NYC jobs that you could apply for, and guess what? It takes 6 to 8 months to get the job once you've been offered a conditional placement. We have to cut that time. Who can get a job and wait 6 to 8 months to see $1? No one. So we're losing valuable talent in the city of New York because of that wait time. And as the president of that committee, the chair of that committee, I've really been digging in on that and trying to do things like do fee waivers for civil service, making sure that there's materials that are available to study for the civil service exam in different languages. For example, if you're applying for a position of a maintenance worker, why do you need a college degree? It's listed as a position that needs a college degree. Why? Lower that so that you could get that position filled. And so, it's a lot of work, but we need a willing partner across the hall in City Hall.
Yeah, and this is the minutia that you don't hear about a lot, but which I think is so important, because when people are frustrated because they can't get the services, there's a reason why this is happening, and there is a solution to make sure that those jobs, that those services are available. But it seems like willful ignorance to just ignore that.
Mismanagement and corruption. Those are the words.
There you go.
Perfect.
Led, I think now it's time to take a short pause so that we can pay some of the bills.
You want to tell them a little about donations and how they could help the show?
Absolutely. We can't do this without contributions from our viewers. You're going to see a QR code which you can scan. You can make a contribution towards Uptown Voices. It's going to be helpful for us to elevate our production. We have dreams and aspirations of doing live shows. We have dreams and aspirations of being on location at our various cultural institutions, and we can't do that without contributions from viewers and listeners like you. And we also can't do that without our sponsors. And this pilot season, we are lucky to have a great sponsor, 181 Cabrini. It's our neighborhood bistro. Both Led and I are just steps away from 181 Cabrini, and we love it. 181 Cabrini is located right there on that corner of 181 and Cabrini, just steps away.
181 and Cabrini.
Just steps away from the bridge. So yeah, I love it. Led, you and I were there the other night.
Yeah, and we also met there for the first time. You and I, the first time we met, we had like lunch there, and it's my local bar now. Like, since I live, you and I both live like right around. It's my local bar. I spend a lot of times there. James Lee, the owner, is just an incredible restaurateur. Right, I think He's a great guy. He's super funny, but like the food is on point. So please hit up 181 Cabrini. It is really one of my favorite spots. 181 Cabrini, pull up. That's my spot. Show them love and tip well.
And order the nachos. Those are on point. And
the sangria is amazing. Everything in there. You have to try the coconut bread pudding. They got coconut. They got chocolate, and now they got banana, but the coconut, outstanding. So like I said, it's the attention to detail for me. It's a great neighborhood joint, and thank you to James and 181 Cabrini for sponsoring this episode. And if you want to sponsor, holla at my boy. You know what I mean? Let's make it happen. You know what I mean? But yeah, without further ado though, let's get to it.
But before we do that, I just want to say one thing. We're going to have a redemption code at the end of this episode, which you can bring to 181 Cabrini for a special treat.
Let's go. And Carmen, I think it's important that I bring up a topic that's really important to a lot of people in the Heights, and that's the NYPD Commissioner Jessica Tisch, ruling against the Civilian Community Review Board and a judge on the murder of Alan Felice. Like that's so heartbreaking. I met the family, and I'm sure they're still like, this just happened, so this has to be devastating for them. Can you give us,
Yes.
your thoughts on that and your background on that story?
Yeah, well, first of all, I want to give my condolences, as always, to Alan Felice's family. Alan was from Uptown. His brother is from here. I went to high school with his partner. There's 2 degrees of separation between all of us. And basically, he was murdered on a traffic stop for not having a seatbelt on, but he had a seatbelt on. He was tased, beaten, and shot, and left naked on the streets of the Bronx by a police officer who's still on the force and has been since promoted to lieutenant. And so Judge Maldonado, who's a deputy commissioner for trials for the NYPD, found him guilty. Not only did she find him guilty, she found him guilty, and she specifically said that he lied under oath. And so the CCRB and Commissioner Maldonado both found him guilty, and the recommendation was that he be fired. Think about this, right? He murdered someone in cold blood in the streets of New York, and the best we can get is for him to be fired. Mm-hmm. And Commissioner Tisch, who many have, sworn up and down that she is a reformer, has now said that she will not be firing him. She went against the CCRB and went against her own deputy commissioner, and is saying that he is not guilty, and that he's not guilty of using lethal force, and that he won't be fired. And so we've been working with the Justice Committee and Alan's family to find justice. We've gone to like 100 different actions. We've also written letters. I met personally with Commissioner Tisch. That led nowhere. And at this point, the family does have a civil suit that they've put against the NYPD on behalf of Alan's son, who was only 6 months old when Alan died and will never get to see his son grow up. And that is the recourse that the family has at this moment, because Commissioner Tisch is refusing to do her job and fire Lieutenant, if you will, Rivera. And so, again, another reason why we need an independent CCRB, that when decisions are made and that someone is found guilty, that the administrative phase of it is upheld and that police officer is fired. But it's also why we need another police commissioner, because this police commissioner has shown that she is not accountable to the people. She's not accountable to her own procedures within the NYPD that are for discipline. And so we're going to keep on fighting for Alan, with his family and the Justice Committee, and continue to bring attention to this case.
Yeah, because on the video, shocking. I'm sorry. Yeah, shocking. And then the video, that's the camera that you hear him say, "I'm going to kill you." Like, he tells him he's going to kill him. So it's insane that he did not.
And not only that, they said that the reason that he killed Alan was because he was fearful that his partner was in danger. But when the video finishes at the end, he says, "My hand got tired." So he got tired of messing around with Alan and shot him because he was tired. It's a callous disregard for life. And I said this at a press conference like a week ago, and I'll say it again. When Eric Adams comes to our community and dances bachata and tells people, "I'm Dominican, baby," we got to ask him why he doesn't care about Dominican babies. This was a Dominican son that was killed on the streets of the Bronx. And the mayor hasn't even met with the family in person to give condolences and to take this case on. So don't tell us you care about your community, our community, and then turn around and not deliver any justice for this family.
Yeah, the reasoning why it's okay that they give is something to do with the car was moving and they were fearful of it being used in a way. But when you watch it and when you hear, it's just shocking what happened. Is there any further recourse that the family has? Is there an appeal process to the commissioner's
There's
ruling,
a
or is that
there's
final?
It's pretty much final. There is an appeal. They can continue to exhaust appeals, but at this point, the commissioner does have the final say. That's why we're trying to get legislation done that takes that power away from the commissioner, so that when decisions are made, the commissioner cannot reverse those decisions. But that, the legislative process is going to take some time. In addition to that, like I said, the family has filed a civil suit against the NYPD. The NYPD last year, I believe, paid $121 million in lawsuits to New Yorkers that they either wrongfully killed or hurt or beat in the streets of New York. Think about that: $121 million that could be going to students, that could be going to food pantries, that could be going to lawyers.
Yeah, the way that the city is funding its priorities is another shocker. And it's not helping our youth be educated. It's not feeding our most vulnerable populations, and it's going back. It's too much of the. I mean, there's certainly issues with safety and quality of life. Issues, which I think we need to get into. But at the same time, just giving the police department a blank check is not working because the police department it doesn't care to be involved with quality of life issues. And when they do get involved with whatever this was, it has disastrous effects. Yeah, it's sad.
Carmen, so I know, time is short. You know what I mean? I know you have to go. I'm hoping that we can make this a regular thing, maybe
Yes.
every 6 months, because I think it's important to work in tandem, right? That we're on the same page, right? So hopefully
Absolutely.
we can do that. And I know you got to get off soon. But one of my biggest issues, and I think I've told you about is the beginning of heroin in our community, right? It's I blame the corner project. You may feel different. I think the corner project has exacerbated and it's created a heroin corridor because I live in this area now.
Yeah.
And
We
I
both
feel
do, yeah.
like, when I was a kid growing up, my mom still lives on Wadsworth. I could see through the valley. I used to be able to see Fort Washington and Fort Tryon Park. And that was when you made it, when you lived on Fort Wash, right? And now I live on Fort Wash, and it feels really like, gross.
Yeah.
Can you tell us I know you got to run. Give us a little bit of
Yeah.
what do you think on the
Well,
topic and what can be
let me
done.
let me give you a few things. The first thing is that the OPC on point, the center, was brought into our community with no community input. That's the first thing. And look, I know that community input could be like a code word for an obstacle. But the reality is that when you're bringing that type of center to a community that's already overburdened, think about our community. We got
Right.
heavy drug sales. We have a displacement problem, a homelessness problem, right? And there is no conversation that happens with elected officials or any community board or anybody else to cite one of these centers in our district. That is problematic for me, right? It would have been much better if, and again, this happened the last day of de Blasio administration on December 30th. He announced the opening of the OPC.
The last day?
The last day of his administration.
Yeah.
So I wasn't even sworn in as the council member yet, and he had made an agreement with Eric Adams in their transition to open up the two centers. They opened one here in Washington Heights and one in El Barrio. I will say this: there is an addiction epidemic happening in our community, and there's an overdose epidemic happening in our community. The problem is that it creates an ecosystem or a corridor, as you say, where people are purchasing drugs, using them, and staying in that area. And it's basically concentrating this epidemic to a portion of our community. I get so many calls about syringes all over the place, about people laid out on 181st in our train stations. I mean, I've taken on the issue of the train stations on my back. I've been to every train station. I basically live in them, trying my best to improve a little bit the quality of life. It's distressing. Two things I wanna bring across, and I know that you agree with me on this, but we know that addiction is an issue, right? It's a health issue. It should be viewed as a public health issue. Anybody can fall in the throes of addiction, no matter your zip code, no matter your nationality, your origin, your, you know, the amount of money you have. But when you look, you take a real deep look into where these centers are placed. Like I said, they're placed in communities where we're already the system is overwhelmed. The system is at capacity, right? And so it creates the perfect storm. I will say this. I did visit On Point. I made it my mission to go there. Two things I think could have been done better. Their vision, On Point's vision, is that the center is a full service center, meaning that people can bring their drugs in, use them, inject safely, stay there, and wear off the high, if you will. That hasn't always occurred because the center, the footprint of the center is right across the street from a park. So people get high and they go into the park, or they straggle in that surrounding area and they congregate with others. So it creates hotspots in the corridor. Mm-hmm. The second thing is that they don't have the manpower nor the resources to man the center 24/7. And at first, when the center came in and I had some really tough conversations with them, I was like, well, I'm not giving you more money because you're bringing the needles in and you're doing this and you're doing that. And then I started to think about it. And I visited the center several times. And I'm like, well, I can't say to them, you're not being a partner in fixing this issue and then tie their hands. We got to give them some resources so they can scale some programming up. For example, the program that picks up the needles throughout the community, that needs to be scaled out, because how are we going to have enough manpower to visit every train station, to visit every hotspot? They've created a route in partnership with our office where we tell them, hit these routes because this is where we're seeing the problem. I invite and I welcome the community to give us that information. It's confidential. I know that there's a lot that goes into this emotionally for people when they see folks laid out. Send us the information. We try to tell people, don't take pictures of people. We want to respect everyone's humanity, even if you're laid out in that condition. Do not take pictures of people, but send us the addresses. Tell us where people are, and we will send folks from On Point. We have a good communication in terms of like the train stations they're hitting, when they're hitting them, and how often. The other thing is that we have two epidemics happening at the same time, because it's addiction and mental health, which are not always correlated, but sometimes they are, and then homelessness. There is not a good system right now in the city to deal with the homelessness issue, especially if you're a homeless person that has both addiction and or mental health. We need supportive housing being built in communities. But the problem is, if I get a project that comes into my district, I'm saying I want 99% affordable, 100% affordable, because that's what my community needs, and I'm going to negotiate for the affordability part. But then they tell me, all right, well, you need a homeless set aside. And then I'm going to go have that conversation with my community, and people are going to be like, well, we don't want homeless people in our building. But everybody who's in a home is no longer homeless. And that's how we solve the problem. So we sometimes have to break that mentality of like, no, I tell them, give me 10% homeless set aside. You're going to build here. Give me, I want 99%, 100% affordable and a homeless set aside, because I want to take people off those streets. The hardest population to house is adult single men. And so when a shelter's coming in, another thing that causes a lot of controversy in our community, people are like, I don't want the shelter. But where are these men going to go? If they're not in a shelter, they're on the streets. And so there's a lot of like compounding conversations that are layered upon each other that we have to have as a community. But I agree with you that centers can't just be dropped into the middle of a community and say, you deal with it. So if it was up to me, I would have redone how the process was done, have real community input, have an education, and then we can probably say, hey, this is a better location for this center to be, not where it is right now.
It feels like an experiment, though, to be honest. It feels like an experiment.
It does.
There's only two in the country, and they're the only places in Manhattan where people of color have any power. It feels like it's a Trojan horse for gentrification, and that's how I feel. Yeah. And again, I also want to say one thing, that like what you're telling a lot of these young people is to sell drugs, right? If you're gonna have a captive audience to sell drugs to, go ahead and sell drugs. So I mean, that's a topic that I think we need to discuss further. But
we gotta dive deeper.
Yeah,
but thank you for everything. Thank you for taking your time. Go ahead, Carla. I don't mean to interrupt you.
I was just going to say it's a work in progress, and we need the collaboration of our neighbors too, of other districts, which obviously they're not gonna. That doesn't seem to be something that they're trying to do. Like, we want to make sure that we can get everybody.
Right.
So yeah.
If heroin is such a problem, then it should be everywhere. There should be one every 10 blocks,
Exactly.
not just in Washington Heights and El Barrio. Like
I
it
agree with
feels
you on that.
right. It feels a little offensive.
I
Carmen,
agree with you.
anything you want to say before? I know you got to go. Thank you
Just
so much for
that
taking time.
it's been so empowering to share space. There's so many issues that we could talk about. I think we could spend hours here. But
Yes.
I want to be grateful to both of you for allowing me the platform and the space. I think all of these conversations come from a place of love. Like,
Exactly.
when I identify myself, I tell people, I'm a Latina, I'm a Dominicana, I'm a mom, and I'm from Uptown. Like, we
Uptown,
wear
baby.
that in
That's
our
right.
hearts. And
Yep.
I'm so excited for the work that you all are doing and shining a light on our community, a positive light on what is happening. And I'm just looking forward to making sure that we continue these conversations. So I'm coming back.
Okay.
Awesome.
Let's try to
Awesome.
schedule that.
Thank you
so much.
We really appreciate your time. Thank you
All
for
right.
being here, for
Thank
speaking
you.
with us, and for your work.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining us in this episode of Uptown Voices, brought to you by 181 Cabrini, your neighborhood bistro just steps away from the North Walk of the George Washington Bridge. Use the code Uptown Voices Season 1 for your discount. And to stay up to date on the latest in Uptown, you can follow Uptown Collective on Instagram, Facebook, and X. If you're watching Uptown Voices on YouTube, don't forget to smash the subscribe button and to give us a like. And don't forget, we also need financial contributions from listeners like you to produce, improve, and expand our content. To contribute, please scan the QR code on the screen or visit www.livingamericana.com. That's living without a G. Until next time, this has been Uptown Voices.